Thanks for listening to Creative Control. While I have you here, please consider supporting Youth Empowerment and Support Services, otherwise known as YES. Based in Edmonton, Alberta, YES provides immediate and low-barrier overnight and day shelter, temporary supportive housing, and individualized wraparound supports for young people aged 15 to 24. They work collaboratively within a network of care focused on the prevention of youth homelessness by providing youth with the necessary supports to stabilize their housing, improve their well-being, build life skills, connect with community, and avoid re-entry into homelessness. Learn more about how to donate or otherwise support YES by visiting yess.org.
Hi, I'm Jed Bodwin, and I live in Wichita, Kansas. I am a Patreon supporter for Creative Control. I discovered Creative Control some years ago, I think maybe while looking for interviews with Tommy Stinson of The Replacements. And I stumbled across this conversation that Vish had with Tommy Stinson that was really insightful. Vish held his own. I think Tommy can be a little bit of a difficult interview at times. And it went really well, and it really got into some areas that I wasn't expecting. And I thought, gosh, I have to listen to more of this guy and his podcast. Yeah, sometimes I'm not necessarily a fan of the music or musicians that Vish will have on the show, but I always appreciate their creative process a little bit more. And more times than not, though, it does lead me to finding a new musical artist that I'm interested in, or to think a little bit differently about maybe some artists whose work I've overlooked. So, go ahead, and if you've been waiting at all to support Vish and Creative Control, now is probably the best time to do it. I know as a public radio employee here in Kansas, listener-supported broadcasting, whether it's podcasts or radio itself, really isn't a thing of the past. It's actually very much a thing of both the present and the future. So, yay Vish, yay Creative Control.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today. Creative Control with Vish Khanna.
Laurie Kilmartin is a talented stand-up comedian, a New York Times best-selling author, and Emmy-nominated writer who is originally from and currently based in the state of California. A working comic for some 35 years, Kilmartin has written for various television shows, including the entire run of Conan O'Brien's TBS series Conan. Her comedic memoirs, Shitty Mom and Dead People Suck, are each critically acclaimed, and she co-hosts the funny and frank podcast The Jackie and Laurie Show with comedian Jackie Cation. Kilmartin's latest special is 2021's Corset, which can be streamed on most audio platforms, and she's scheduled to perform at Just for Laughs Toronto between September 22nd and 26th, 2022. Laurie and I connected recently to discuss California life and California tension, her comedy origin story, how she publicly grieved the loss of her mother on Twitter after she succumbed to COVID-19, what it was like working on Conan and being a performer who writes for late-night TV, our weird attention spans and making the Jackie and Laurie Show with Jackie Cation, the time Laurie was oddly featured on a long and weird Fox News segment, why comedy is in the news a lot these days, appearing on the new TV series Gutsy with Hillary and Chelsea Clinton, other future plans, and more. A part of the Entertainment One network with the support of listeners like you who follow and subscribe to this podcast and spread the word about it and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, where you can also hear episodes of the show earlier than everybody else. Plus in-kind support from Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Granddad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario. This is episode 715 of Creative Control, featuring the brilliant and hilarious Laurie Kilmartin with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hi, Laurie. How's it going?
It's going great, Vish. How are you?
I'm well. It's really a pleasure to speak with you. I'm a fan. First of all, I'm in Edmonton, Alberta in Canada. Where in the world are you?
Right now I'm in Burbank, California, but I will be in Toronto September 22nd through 26th doing some shows for JFL.
That's early plugging. I love it. No, I know. That's kind of why we're talking, which is exciting.
Well,
it's exciting.
I always feel like at least 3 people are going to turn off the podcast as soon as they hear my voice. So I need to get that plug in instantly.
I feel the same. I've long sounded a bit like a Muppet, I think. Just like a little bit. I hear it now. Now, yeah, I shouldn't have pointed it out.
Yeah.
You sound great. I always think you sound great. So don't fret
you.
about that. Burbank, California. You are originally from California, are you not?
Yeah, Northern California from Walnut Creek, which is about 20, 30 minutes from Oakland, East Bay. Yeah.
Nice. So you haven't ever felt compelled to leave? Have you lived anywhere else in the United States of America?
I lived in New York for 10 years, and I go back all the time still. So I feel like I'm straddling the nation.
Oh, man. Did you just name your next comedy special? Straddling the Nation would be pretty amazing, actually. That's amazing. Right. Oh, but you're ensconced relatively in California, I think. That's fair to say. Straddling or no?
My son is going to school in California, so as much as I'm tied to that, I am. Yeah.
Okay. Now, California, from our perception, is thought of as a really cool, progressive place. Your firsthand knowledge of the state. Is it a cool, progressive place? Is it nice to live in California?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love it. I was born and raised here, so I love it. I love Northern California. There's this thing where, Bay Area people are raised to hate Los Angeles and its residents before we moved there. So people in Los Angeles have no idea and don't care. So I do carry a chip on my shoulder that I have to hide unless I'm with other Bay Area people. But yeah, I love it. I love the topography, and I like the weather except for this week. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's progressive, and there's a massive homeless problem. So
yes.
it's a little of I think it's people that are progressive in their heads, but then when they start voting, it gets less progressive. But I guess that's a lot of liberals. So
I really appreciate that perspective. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I wasn't sure if it was as progressive, because sometimes I go on Twitter and I'll see like California is canceling gasoline. I'm like, oh, that's good. That's probably good. That's probably what we should be doing. But then I hear from folks like you are like, yeah, but then there's a massive sociocultural, there are so many issues here that don't get addressed because all we hear is kind of that positive stuff. So I appreciate that perspective. I've not heard, do many states in America have a regional conflict? Like just a state? I've heard of like New York State hates California State. As a sports fan myself, I buy into that. Like I hate, or like for me, growing up, Letterman guy, which made me hate Leno. Then grew up a Conan guy, then hated Leno. There's a lot of, sorry. That's not geographic. That's just an issue I have. But my point is this. You're talking about like north-south divide in California. Is that normal to have these chips on your shoulders?
From what I hear, the Boston people and the rest of Massachusetts are at odds, but you'd have to talk to a Boston comic about that.
Right.
I do remember growing up that the perception was that LA was taking our water and giving nothing back in return. So I think that might be part of it. But there's also like this horrific red center of California between say Santa Cruz on the lowest end of the Bay Area and Santa Clarita on the top end of LA. And in between that is I-5 and I-99 and thousands of beating heart pro-life billboards.
Oh, I see.
And,
okay.
and Newsom, some crazy anti-Newsom people. So, yeah. There's a lot going on in this state.
Okay.
It could be 3 or 4 states for sure.
That's right. But you only have, you have very little representation in the various legislative places considering your population, right?
shameful that we have the same amount of senators as Wyoming. And one of our senators has dementia and so far gone that I think she can't admit it because she may not even know.
Is that Susan Collins? Is that Susan Collins? Sorry, I can't keep track of. There's her too, right? I can't remember all of the people.
Susan Collins is a super annoying Republican from Maine. I'm talking about Dianne Feinstein.
It's Feinstein.
Dianne Feinstein.
Sorry, I got confused. As we're speaking, the Queen also passed away, and she's those two other folks. I'm only drawing this connection because they're about the same age, aren't they? Yeah, sort of like in their 80s or 90s.
Feinstein's a little, Feinstein's in her 80s, so she's younger.
Right. She's spring chicken. Yeah.
I think the Queen aged better mentally than Feinstein did.
Yeah,
I mean, that happened this morning. I have to tell you, Vish, my son may have a broken bone in his hand. We're going to check it tomorrow. We couldn't get an appointment until tomorrow. But I made him make his own breakfast because I couldn't stop tweeting jokes about the Queen. Like, that's how exciting it is for a comedian to be on Twitter when something like that happens.
Yes.
I mean, everyone's on their own. I can't care for people at this point,
You are great at the Twitter.
Butter your own toast.
Yeah, you're great at the Twitter. I will say, I want to get to Twitter in a moment. Your poor son. We know from your live, or rather your comedy specials, that your son tore an ACL. As far as I know, I don't know what's happened since then. In the special, you talk about how he's maybe prone to tear the other one. Did that happen? Has he torn both?
No, he tore one when he was 10, which is really young for that. Yeah. And I already forgot the joke. Like, as soon as I put that special out, I'm like, I never want to tell 80% of all of these jokes again, but I'll keep a few just until I fill out the set. Yeah. But the doctor said the other one would be bound to tear.
Right.
So don't get too comfortable.
And now another injury? That's what you're saying? Like, what is? Yeah. Is he like? Is your kid Steve Urkel? What's going on there? Accident prone?
He is. I think so. He plays water polo, so we got him in a sport where he's not landing on his knees, which is good. But in this case, he slipped on the equipment room because he walked in wet from swimming and broke the fall with his hand. So.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I have two children myself, and that kind of stuff terrifies me. But so far so good. Yeah. So far they're 11 and 7. They're not water polo age. Are they water polo?
Yeah, water polo.
Is that the age of water? When do you start playing water polo?
Depends where you live. Probably age never in Edmonton.
That's right. It's just all ice.
You could start at age 5 in Southern California.
Okay, got it. Speaking of starting things in California, comedy. I want to ask you about your origin story a little bit because I don't quite know it. Also, I want to say, and I meant to say it earlier, my condolences to you on the loss of your parents. Particularly, during the pandemic, you lost your mother. That's correct? Is that right?
I did. Yeah. I mean, it was a couple years ago now. Yeah. That's how long the pandemic is. But she died of COVID in June of 2020. Yeah. Which is a setup to a joke of mine. But and then my dad died of cancer in 2014. So thank you for the condolences. I'll take them, even if they're many years after. But I did tend to tweet about them and make a lot of jokes about them. So people are, I think, a little more aware that my parents are dead than other people's because I consider that fertile ground for comedy.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I didn't mean to make things awkward by expressing my empathy. What? I don't know why, but I did. I was just trying to be like, because why I'm hesitating, if you will. I want to go back to your origin story, which I assume, as a comedian, assume has something to do with your upbringing or your family. I know for me, that's part of my story, obviously. When did you first get into comedy? And within that, was your family funny? How did that work out for you?
My mom was funny, and my dad was funny too. And but it kind of he would say funny things, and then he would say things that were accidentally funny. One of those guys. So it was a lot of laughs were had.
Oh, nice.
I started in San Francisco in 1987. I did my first open mic at this place called Foo Bars, which was a club in Pleasant Hill at the time. And then it moved, and then it became a church, and then it became a Chinese restaurant. it's so sad to drive by a building that used to be a comedy club. You know, it always hurts. It hurts more than going to, visit your parents at the cemetery in a way. You just.
I will say comedy club to Chinese restaurant to church. No, comedy club to church to Chinese restaurant is a funny, that's a funny trajectory.
And it makes sense. Yeah. And here's the thing. It could be a comedy club again, because where do you start doing one comedy night a week at a Chinese restaurant?
Absolutely. Right. Okay. So do you have a sense? Okay. I appreciate that. Do you have a sense of what propelled you to do that? Who thinks this is whether you get this all the time? I got it as a musician and even doing this, and you probably get it as a comedian. Why do you have the audacity? Who told you could do this? Where did this come from? Do you know where you got the confidence and the urge to think that is something I, Laurie Kilmartin, can do? Do you know where that came from?
Well, originally I wanted to be an actress, and then due to things happening, trauma in my life, I gained a ton of weight, and I was like, oh, okay, I can't be an actress anymore. Because as far as I knew, everyone was a size 2 or whatever. And I'm like, oh, all right. And so I don't know, somehow I started seeing stand-up comedy, just going to watch it live and thinking it looked fun, but not thinking it was something I could do. And then I saw somebody who wasn't very good at it, or somebody I thought I could be funnier than. And then I'm like, oh, okay, if that person can do it, that's almost how I accomplish anything, is seeing somebody I don't think is very good at it and seeing them succeed in it and going, oh, I could be better than that person.
I can relate to that if it for what it's worth. That's when my wife and I started doing like a college radio show, it was because, and it's no offense to anyone, I just heard what was going on and thought, I think we can do this at least a little bit better. And we were told we did. And I think that is a motivation. Like, I think I can contribute to this part of the culture. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And what just occurred to me is you and I are both that person for somebody else, right? Like
I'm happy about that.
Sees me at a show and is like, no, let me on that stage. I can trash this woman. Yeah.
But I'm happy about that. Like I think all of us who put something out into the world do hope someone gets something out of it that drives them to do it. I hope I put that across. Do you feel that? Sorry.
No, I feel nothing but viciousness and cruelty from you.
Competition? Like, are you just so like, I must crush all young millennials. I don't want them to succeed. I don't feel that from you. I feel like when you get to a certain age, you become an inadvertent mentor. Are you feeling that a bit? So. Do you feel that a little bit?
It's like I'm 57, so the intros are getting a little like I'm Queen Elizabeth or something, it's like, right. And the thing about comedy is you don't get to rest on any of your history. You have to be funny on stage that night. So, to me, it kind of doesn't matter if I've been doing it 30 something years or 2 years. Like I just have to be funny when I'm brought up on stage that night.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So did you have like a point in your trajectory that you think of as like your break, like where it felt like you were on to something that you could, like a viable career? I'm sorry, I will also say for those who don't know, and I mentioned it in the intro, you are renowned as being a writer on Conan. That was a important gig for you, I think. That's fair?
Yeah, for sure.
That was a huge one. But was there something ahead of that where you're like, oh, this is, I feel like I've made it. I feel like this is financially viable. This feels good. Is there a point in your trajectory that comes to mind?
Well, I guess my first writing job was on Tough Crowd, which was Colin Quinn's show on Comedy Central. And before that, it didn't occur to me that I could be a writer. It literally seemed like a guy job.
I see. Yeah.
Pretty much every writer credit that you saw scroll past you on Comedy Central were men.
Yeah.
So it just felt like that's what they did. And I'm a comic and I liked stand-up comedy anyway. And then Colin was hiring a ton of stand-up comics. And I guess that I overcame, whatever my hesitancy was and, tried to send him a bunch of ideas and really lobbied and tried to get a job on that show, which I eventually did.
So your story is not that unusual, but I also wonder if you can talk a little bit about the ego involved or rather the role of the ego in saying, hey, we think you're really funny as a stand-up. Can you be behind the scenes and write? As a performer, what was that like for you, that transition?
Well, that's not how they put it,
Oh, sorry.
Like
I was paraphrasing. I wasn't there. I wasn't part of the negotiations. I'm guessing that's what happened. That's all.
It's more like you are deciding you can sort of sublimate your ego and write for somebody else. So that takes a while. And some people can't do it. And they realize as they're writing a packet that they can't do it. Like they can't write jokes that they can't tell. You know what I mean? Which is fine, So it's more you realizing that you could mimic somebody else's voice, and it not interfering with your own voice. And for me, because I've pretty much only written for male hosts, because that's pretty much all there is. It's really easy to split that up in my head. My personal life and what I write for my act, nothing would ever translate over to a Conan monologue or any monologue,
Yeah.
So it doesn't, structurally, I writing for Conan for all these years made me a much better joke writer, and that transfers over to my own writing for myself.
Yeah.
But the topics don't cross ever, really.
I'm someone who is really steeped in the Larry Sanders Show. Did you ever watch that show?
Oh, I love that show. Yeah.
Well, that was my entry point into watching. There's episodes where Sarah Silverman plays a comedian, and there's like tension between her and the character Phil. They're both comedy writers, and he's threatened by her as a woman. But one of the things that I learned from that show that I maybe didn't think about was watching comedy writers watching a host fuck up their jokes. Oh, he hit the punchline wrong. Oh, he hit this. He hit the phrasing wrong. And I was like, oh, I never even thought of that. And I will say, since really acquainting myself with your comedy specials, I now think I try to in retrospect, I suppose, because it's not on the air anymore. I can kind of in my mind hear Laurie's voice in Conan. As
weird.
Like I'm just a weirdo who does stuff like this because I'm a nerd, I guess, and I like comedy.
That's what I was told about you. Yes.
But anyway, who told you that? I would like to know. I need a name on that.
I would say it's more he had an influence on me.
Yeah.
I don't think he wasn't like going to me for joke reads.
No, of course not.
I think me learning his rhythm and writing in his rhythm, I probably wrote my own stuff in that rhythm as well.
Yeah.
Not necessarily on purpose, but just because I was used to writing in that rhythm. But yeah, the thing about watching like a joke, and then, when you're telling a joke, you have to say every word perfectly. And if you fumble just even like a word, like your mouth sort of fumbles a little bit, it's over. I mean, the joke's going to get at best half as much of a laugh, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yeah.
And so that's, I've seen that happen many times and just gone, oh, dang it.
Yeah.
But the host is thinking that too. Like, it's just you're speaking all the time and your brain gets ahead of your mouth, and then there's just mush sometimes.
Well, it's also such a hamster wheel to write for a talk show like that. Every day you got to make something amazing and then let it go. That's a huge, as a comedian who writes your own stuff that you take on the road and say over and over again, I imagine it must be weird, because I've dealt with topical monologues before, and it seems like weird to spend that much time on something you're going to say once. Did you ever?
I know. It's weird because I will spend years on one like 3-minute chunk, getting it perfect. And the idea that someone has to say, I'll also do a 3-minute chunk, and they only get to say it that one time. There's no rehearsal. Yeah, it is bizarre.
It is strange.
Yeah. I think that's probably why a lot of monologue jokes follow a formula, because at least the formula is in your head already. The words are different, but at least that part's in your head. You don't have to practice that part.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to ask a bit of a Conan question. Sorry, just for the record here, because I like it, we're doing some sort of government census thing right now. I don't know why I said for the record, but
well, the Queen is dead, and we have to, Charles is your king now, so you have to go over everything again.
That's true, and true. In Canada, I salute Charles III or whatever his name is right now. No,
God.
What iteration of Conan's work did you join him on, if that makes sense?
I was on the TBS show, so the last iteration. So from 2010 to 21.
I wanted to get your perspective on this because I'm a real student of late night in that I was raised watching late night TV, and I really admire most of, and like you said, they're mostly dudes. What is your perspective on how Conan, you were there, that TBS show evolved in a way that I have not seen any late night talk show, a host of Conan's sort of pedigree and renown. You guys made a point of like, you know what? This isn't working. We're going to keep changing the format. Like, I think the format of that TBS show might have changed 3-4 times. Is that about right?
Feels like it, yeah. I mean, going to a half hour was a big deal. It cut out some time for comedy,
yeah,
which was hard on us, the comedy writers, and we cut out like mostly two of the guests. I think sometimes he would do a shorter interview and maybe have a stand up on.
Yeah.
When he had a stand up, he would do a shorter main interview. But I think if you watch a lot of late night shows, aside from the stand-ups, the second and third guests are often not anyone you need to hear from.
Yeah, but as a kid, that's where I'm like, sorry, I was a Norm Macdonald.
Yeah.
I was a Norm Macdonald guy, and
Right.
I got to know him just a little bit, and I loved him, and I discovered him and people like him. I remember like Sandra Bullock. I'll say this: I'm not a huge Sandra Bullock fan, but she started to. Sorry, is that wrong? Is that a wrong thing to say? I don't mean it.
Well, she's an American icon.
I'm sorry,
and you have an American comic on your podcast. So I don't know.
You're absolutely correct. I would like to retract what I said. Anything negative, but she started out as kind of like a third tier Letterman guest, and then blew everyone away. She was funny, and it surprised him and it surprised everyone. I remember that. Anyway, but Norm, those sort of segments were a showcase for really interesting people, I often thought.
Sure. Like I said, aside from the stand-up.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You
and
did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out of the thousands, maybe tens of thousands, second and third guests, you pick Sandra Bullock as the one outlier and the reason to extend shows beyond
Fair enough.
the half hour.
Fair enough.
Okay,
you're right.
understood.
There's a flaw in my reasoning. I appreciate that.
I would say a lot of the time they go in and out of show business, and they're killing time, you know. And so to me, when he went down to a half hour, I felt like he could really focus on one interview with one person that he probably liked. I mean, just think, if you have to memorize you have to work on your monologue, get the timing down on it. Yes, it'll be on a monologue cue cards and stuff, but you still have to have it in your head. You got to set up the desk pieces in that comedy, and now you have to have an interest in three different people, one of whom you may not know, or whose work is just stupid, and you have to pretend like it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot to ask of one person. So I think when you take out, two of those less exciting interviews and you just get to focus on one, it's probably a lot more fun, I think.
I thought it was obviously, I think, a reaction to the way things were being consumed. I don't know if you have you have a podcast, or how many podcasts do you have? It's hard to even know anymore. Do you have more than?
I just have one.
Okay, just making sure.
You're right. It was how, obviously how things were being consumed too. Yeah. I was thinking more artistically, and what a late night show is now versus, when the model, was introduced, it was like 90 minutes. The Tonight Show was 90 minutes long and there was nothing else to watch.
Yes.
And so we stuck so closely to the original model when everything else in the whole world has changed. It's sort of odd that late night is still kind of the same, but who knows?
For the most part, but I think Conan, I think Conan's various shows were inventive and innovative and
totally. Oh yeah, comedically and within that. Yeah, I just mean the thing of it starts at 11:30 after local news, and it goes till 12:30, and who's up watching exactly when it airs? Yeah. Very very few people compared to what I'm just saying, like what a Tonight Show meant to people in the 60s and 70s, it does not mean to people now. It means it's a different thing completely. So that's what I meant. Like it's interesting that most of the shows stick to that structure, even though we don't use it like that.
Yeah, and when I talk about the inventiveness or the innovation, like what I was actually beyond, I know people tend to think of particularly Conan's late night show as being the home for, or rather what I'm referring to. What I'm saying is watching how the TBS show evolved was brave. I viewed it as brave of him saying, okay, I'm going to change. It's going to go to half an hour. Like, yes, we're going to lose the band. Or I think, we're going to lose the band. We're going to lose a bunch of stuff. But I think my reading on it, not knowing what was going on behind the scenes, is he was trying to react to the way things were being consumed. But and why I invoked your podcast is I feel like we're in a confusing realm in terms of what people think other people's attention spans are. Does that make any sense? Yeah. Because Conan's like, we got to get down to half an hour. Maybe people don't care enough. I'm guessing, this is me speculating. Hour's too much. Let's get down to half an hour. Meanwhile, and then you see this a lot. Tweets are short. Viral videos are short, like stories, reels, TikTok. It's all short. Then we have podcasts. Long form.
It's so weird. 4-hour Rogan pod. I know, it's like crazy.
I don't understand do you feel this? Like, what are we doing right now? Who are we catering to? Because some people think everyone has no time for anything. Meanwhile, like you say, these other folks, my show's usually about an hour. And I try to keep it focused. I know this is an exemplary of that. I apologize. But I try to keep it a focused hour. Anyway, do you have any take on that? Just given what you do, how you write, and by the way, you're great at Twitter. I think you're wonderful on Twitter. Do you have any sense of...
It's my favorite.
You're really great at it. Do you have any sense of what we're doing? Hey, Laurie, what are we doing?
I don't know. But the examples you gave are we've cut back on the visual and we've increased the audio.
Yes.
So I don't know what that is. Are people in commuting more? Are they, maybe we're so much on screens that to ask us to then watch an hour of a screen is like, I can't do this anymore. I just did this all day at work.
That's true.
I can't look at this. Like maybe your eyes need to rest. Maybe you just need to not be taking in visual cues for a little bit and just rest your eyes and listen to something. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
I don't know either, and I didn't think we were going to solve all the world's problems today. It's just something I wrestle with too.
That's what I was promised, but okay.
Speaking of
I'll check my email, but yeah, okay.
Speaking of solving the world's problems, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. Tell the folks about the podcast that you do.
Oh, I do one podcast with Jackie Cation, a great, great comedian, and it's called The Jackie and Laurie Show. We don't like to be, cryptic. It's just us. And every week we talk about our weeks. We're both stand-up comics, and we've been doing it since 2015, I think.
Yeah.
So, it's weird. Like neither of us thought necessarily that it would go on this long, because we're like, how long can two women talk about comedy? But a long time. And, there's always some scandal in stand-up. It's so weird because when we started, I don't think stand-up was on everyone's radar like it is now. And now on Twitter, there's a stand-up comedian trending every single day, mostly for terrible reasons, but it's just a thing. It's a hobby or a profession that everyone is aware of now, that they weren't definitely when I started, I don't know. So we always have stuff to talk about. And then we are still in the business. So we sometimes don't name names, we just will allude to certain people because we're probably going to run into them again, but yeah, we discuss all the stuff that's going down.
Now, is it safe to say, and I'm speculating, is Jackie your best friend?
No, my best friend is named Cheryl, and she was a comedian. We met at a one-nighter in Lewiston, Idaho. that this guy named Dave Tribble, who was like an iconic late night, or an iconic one-nighter booker in the Northwest. He just book you on these like weeks. They're usually 4 to 5 day weeks. The gigs were at least 2 hours apart or up to 8 hours apart, right? Like you do a Tuesday in Montana, and then the next Wednesday is in Spokane.
Right.
You have to hit the road early. So I'm sure there's people like that all over Canada that book stuff like that in Canada, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So Cheryl and I met on one of those, and she was working on a spec to become a writer. And so she did. She won an Emmy for King of the Hill, and she's written on a ton of shows. She's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and so we're still best friends. And then Jackie is one of my best friends, and I know she would say the same about me. She does have a best friend. That's not me. We have this weird relationship where like now when we see each other in person, we don't want to say anything because we have to fill an hour every week. So I'm not going to tell her anything, but hey, how's it going? And everything else I'll just say for when it's in, the mics.
Yeah,
the mic in front of
that makes sense. This is gold, you say to each other, and you say like, why are we talking about this now? I will tell you a thing, if I may tell you a quick thing. Jackie Cation, a wonderful, wonderful stand-up comedian, has been on my mind almost every day for the past year and a half, because I owe her a T-shirt. Now, it plagues me that I have not yet sent Jackie a T-shirt. What happened was Jackie was on my show, this show that you're on now, and we had a nice time, and she has been very appreciative. And then like a week later, she's like, "Hey, do you want to be on my podcast, The Dork Forest? Sorry about the podcast confusion. It's hard to keep track of how many podcasts people have right now. I understand you have one. Congratulations. It's good to just have one."
Yeah, and we don't have guests, so I never have to chase down anyone. I mean, it's truly, I'm in a heavenly situation that I will never change.
Well, it's wonderful. She wrote to me about a week after being on my show saying, "Hey, do you want to be on The Dork Forest?" And I said, "Oh, sure, that would be good. When?" And she said, "How about now?" And I was like, "What?" So I was on to talk about Bob Dylan with like no notice. And I was like, oh, okay. And then we did it, and it was fun. It was super fun. She seems like, is that her personality type? Impulsive, spontaneous?
Yeah, she's a planner, and then things fall apart, and then she gets very spontaneous. Yeah, she can handle when things fall apart, and like someone must have canceled, and she, instead of going, "I can't do this podcast anymore, I hate everything," she's like, "I'm going to call Vish.
Yeah.
And let's get some Bob Dylan on." And she did it, and she persuaded you, and it all worked out. So she's actually great in an emergency situation.
Yeah.
See that word? Now, if I was a host, I would have screwed up the word emergency, and that joke would be ruined, right?
Really? Oh, right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess that's true.
What I just did. That's what I'm saying about when people are talking. You know what I mean? Like, so anyway, I probably ruined my point, but always go to Jackie if something goes wrong, because she'll know how to improvise and fix
if there's an emergency. Contact Jackie Cation is what I'm learning. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, not me.
I want to go back to what you were saying about stand-up. You have been in this field for so long. Why do you think we're talking about it more from your perspective? What's going on? Why is it in the news so much?
I guess, most of what's in the news is stand-ups talking, what their jokes are, right? And people saying that they don't like those jokes. That's mostly what it is right now. And it's I think it's so odd for a lot of older comics because we're not used to that. Usually it's like either a joke works, like it gets a laugh, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you end up dropping it at some point. And, there weren't like comedy reviewers when, it's very rare. It's not rare. It's new that people are poring over content, like comedy content, and looking at it. Maybe like in Edinburgh, they've always been doing that during the comedy festival, but not in the States. And I remember like reading like Spin magazine or whatever when I was first starting, or Rolling Stone, and they would just review every album by who the hell knows who these people were, and treat it and give it like a full page and 10 paragraphs. And I always think, why don't they know about stand-up comedy? Why don't they pay attention to comedy like that? And so now they are. And I think a lot of comics aren't used to it, you know, and aren't used to having their stuff vetted, you know, by people that don't like them. So
yeah,
I don't know. There's something, it is interesting to watch. Like, you know, we all have jokes people don't like that we like, you know?
No, that's fair. But I made this argument to a few different folks who come on the show. I don't recall seeing comedy and jokes weaponized in this way, if you will. You were the subject of a Sean Hannity profile because you made jokes about the Roe versus Wade discussion, and then they devoted this bizarre segment featuring like Laura Trump and some other
Pam Bondi.
Yes, Pam Bondi, former governor,
Attorney General of Florida.
Attorney General. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little sleep deprived. I stayed up late watching.
She's a senator from Maine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm usually on the money with my American politicians, but I stayed up late watching that U.S. Open tennis match last night. That went
I heard it was great. Yeah,
it was incredible. But I'm tired now. Anyway, my point is this: you were the subject of this long segment. You did a very hilarious rebuttal to it, but that's bonkers to me. That they pick and choose, because what they do is they say horrible, heinous shit. The let's say the Hannitys of the world, and then when you call them on it, they say we were just joking. And then when the comedian does it, they're like, this couldn't have been a joke. That Laurie Kilmartin said this thing about, you know what I'm saying? What's going on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, it was just like one of those. Is Eamon? He has a show on Sunday nights. No one watches TV on Sunday. Like it couldn't have been a safer place to do an abortion joke on Mother's Day.
You were on MSNBC is what you're referring to, right?
Right. Yeah. So whatever. And then it was just a topical joke, but it got clipped out by MSNBC. I'm 99% sure did this. They sent it to they send all the clips to just little places on the internet that post that stuff. Mediaite is a place. They post,
of course, little
sound bites from late night show from those shows, and those things go all over Facebook. The whole thing. So they posted that, and the headline was comment. Guest says she would have a joyful abortion or something, and it suggested that I was a news anchor or a reporter. And if you had said comedian jokes about abortion, no one would have been interested in it because we all do. So they kind of set me up, MSNBC did, by posting it that way. And then that's all you need to have, people with internet shows have a whole segment about it, because that gets, a lot of Facebook engagement, which I was, I just couldn't believe. It was crazy, the hate I was getting. And then Sean Hannity gets a segment on it, and I don't even know if they said my name. They kept calling me that woman.
Yes.
But they got to do their little abortion talking points, and their little liberals think it's funny. It was just like, I'm just a tool for them right now to, hammer this nail in this wood. So it went away really quick too. Like, I got a bunch of death threats, and I went and bought an expensive home security system, and then within 4 days the whole thing went away. I stopped getting emails. Yeah. It just ended, and people just moved on. They're just distracted little insects, and they swarm for a second, and then there's a new thing, and they go over there, and you just have to survive your swarming, I guess.
It's bizarre. And I'm mindful of the time, because I wish we could talk more about the distinctions between what is supposedly locker room talk and a comedian actually making a joke. But again, I'm mindful of the time here. I want to ask you what's coming up next. Sorry to be abrupt with the plugging and the future plans, but I'm a considerate host, and you have other things to do. What else is coming up for you? So you mentioned the JFL Toronto, which is very exciting. What else is coming up for you, Laurie, there?
I did record a gala, so that'll be airing sometime in Canada. I don't know when they're going to air it. And this Friday on the 9th of September, I'm part of this series that Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton
saw
did
that, yeah.
called Gutsy Women.
Yeah.
So I'm in episode 6 and it's on Apple TV Plus. So, check it out if you want.
How did that come about? How do you get the attentions of the Clintons?
That was somebody I knew from Tough Crowd was working at Apple, and they had like their marquee stand-ups, Wanda Sykes and Amy Schumer, and then I think they needed people that weren't as famous. Yes, I absolutely fit the bill. And so it was myself, Yamanika Saunders, and Maysoon, and the three of us did a roundtable with Hillary and Chelsea at Caroline's Comedy Club for like an hour and a half. It was a very long discussion.
Wow.
It was surreal and cool, and yeah, I don't know how it'll be edited, but it was really fun.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Yeah. So that, as of September 9th, that'll be up on Apple TV. Where can people go to learn more about you, Laurie, and follow you and whatnot?
My website is kilmartin.com, and I just started posting clips on TikTok. I'm a little bit on Instagram, but I'm mostly on Twitter because to me it's much more fun to write jokes than to post a video. But you got to do what you got to do, Vish.
I'm aware. Listen, I really do appreciate this time. I'm a huge fan. I thank you for this. I wish you the best of luck in the future. I hope we talk again someday, Laurie. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Man, that was really fun, and it felt brief, but maybe it was just long enough. I don't know anymore. I just want to thank Laurie Kilmartin for making time for me. I never know what's going to happen with this show sometimes, and I consume a lot of culture, and I admire a lot of people, and 2 weeks ago, I didn't know Laurie Kilmartin would be on this show. And now she's on the show, and I've admired her greatly from afar. I like her comedy. I like her social media. I like everything she does. And now she's on the show. Anyway, I just want to say, Laurie, thank you so much for being on the 715th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network, and is available wherever all of you get your podcast. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for, or if you want to learn more about me, sign up for my monthly newsletter, please visit vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook or follow the show on Twitter at Vish Creative. You can also follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Vishkhanna. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast humming. $6 or more a month grants you access to exclusive and early content. You get the episodes a little bit earlier than everybody else. I dig into my audio archive sometimes and I don't want to say dredge up because that doesn't sound like I'm upselling, but I find old things and I put them on the Patreon that haven't been featured on the podcast before. Sometimes I go into OT with my current new episodes with my guests. I go a little longer. Anyway, all that stuff is on the Patreon. And also, if you want to receive a Creative Control t-shirt while supplies last, just message me once you've made your donation on Patreon, and I will try to get you one just as soon as I possibly can. So thanks. Patreon.com/Creative Control. Thanks again to Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee, respectively, in Guelph, Ontario, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario, for their in-kind support for this show. If you're in any of those cities, go to those places. Tell them I sent you. See if they give you a funny look, like they don't know who I am. That's possible. I don't know who's working the counters those days. Also want to thank Jim Guthrie for letting me use some music of his on the show. He's a dear friend of mine. You can learn more about Jim at jimguthrie.org. You should go up to Jim and mention my name, see if he recognizes me. He might pretend he doesn't know me, but he does. Finally, thank you for listening to this episode with Laurie Kilmartin, who's wonderful. Check out Laurie. Go see her if you're in Toronto at JFL Toronto, and follow her. She's the best. I really admire her. Thanks for subscribing to this podcast or following it and telling your friends about it and spreading the word. It means a lot. I'm going to go. I will talk to you very soon. Thanks again. Bye for now.